Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Bear Leak Project, how the heck are you? I have Michael W. Ford with us here today on the Leak Project. Now, Mr. Ford is a pioneer in writing and discussing and practicing modern magic, but not the type of magic most people know of. This goes back to some of the ancient Babylonian teachings and writings, and we're going to talk about some controversial forms of magic. We're going to get into demonic magic, satanic magic, the adversarial light magic of the Nephilim, which I think is, I really want to get into that because the Nephilim have been, what are they? Who are they? Where are they? We're also going to talk about Babylonian magic, vampire magic, Luciferian witchcraft, and the Drauga. Ladies and gentlemen, the Drauga, if you look at the cover of the Drauga that was written by Mr. Ford, it is a lion wrapped with a snake, a lion being, a lion humanoid wrapped in a snake. And that looks like an ancient Sumerian artifact that I have uncovered and shown you before on the Leak Project. And it looks like, I was thinking like the DNA Enki kind of wrapping even the gods and getting control of the gods. But I can't wait to hear what you have to say on the subject. And also, we're going to talk about magic of the ancient gods, and then satanic magic paradigm of Therion, what it actually means. I'm going to get as much information as I can. I've spent 3 years trying to get Mr. Ford on the program, and he's finally here. So thank you so much for joining us. I know you're extremely busy. How the heck are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on. You have a great structure that you do from everything I've seen, and I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I am just super excited to have you. And also I want to bring up real quick, I'm just going to say, I told you this off the air and I decided I'm going to share it with the audience. About 10 years ago, I really started to get into studying magic, and I picked up a copy of your book. It was a signed copy. It was a hardcover. And I also picked up the 72 Lesser Keys of Solomon at the time. And as I said, as I told you, it was a used copy, and there was some bad mojo on that used grimoire. And I didn't know enough about what it actually was, so I got rid of all the books, and I wish I would have kept the one that you wrote, because I started looking through it and I was just like, wow, this is phenomenal. So let's jump right in. I mean, what exactly is the Luciferian doctrine? What is that? Because most people have a different analysis. Everybody's going to say something different. What is your version? What is your definition?
Well, Luciferian, there's a lot around Luciferian magic in the tradition that I work in, but to really nail it down, it begins, and the foundation is a philosophy, and it's based around the 11 points of power. And these 11 points are kind of simple philosophical ways of approaching life internally, beginning with your mental state, with the way you think, and the goals that you have and what you want to achieve. And around this, we have kind of how do you make that as simple as can be? 3 points: liberation, illumination, apotheosis. Liberation is breaking chains of restricted thought or a belief system that you're not comfortable with, that you don't feel connected to. Illumination is gaining specific knowledge or insight, wisdom that you need to accomplish short-term and long-term goals. And then apotheosis is the process of applying those things. And with Luciferianism, you don't have to begin performing specifically ceremonies or ceremonial rituals. All magic begins from your intent, your will, your desire, and your belief. So applying the philosophy in those points will over time create that change in your mind to begin thinking and evolving. And that is an act of magic within itself. And then, of course, applying the ceremonial ritual magic, if you so desire, is the next step. So Luciferianism is a path of transformation.
You have compiled 24 books on magic.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, this stuff isn't fluff. And you go back to some of the ancient teachings, the Babylonian writings and such. And I recently uncovered a book from 1890. I think it was by Mathers, where he was talking about some of these ancient Sumerian demons and, very powerful deities that were found written on these cuneiform tablets. And so let's go back to the beginning of Luciferianism. People you know, who is Lucifer? Is Lucifer Satan? Is it a real being? Is it Venus? Is it both?
Well, to understand precisely what Lucifer is, who Lucifer is, understand that Lucifer is, if you consider demon spirits and gods, what are those? In Luciferianism, I kind of call them deific masks. And what those is like a god form or a specific representation or sigil of a particular type of energy within nature and accessible within ourselves. Lucifer, if you go to the earliest beginnings, there is in the ancient city of Ugarit, or the ruins of what's now called Ras Shamra, they found a Tanite or Ugaritic tablet in a temple, that's where they found the Baal cycle. And it talks about before 800 years before Isaiah's text of Lucifer falling, or Helil ben Shahar falling from heaven, Ashtar or Athtar the rebel, who's called the Shining Rebel, fell from the throne of Baal. The earliest mention of Ashtar, who's connected with a deity called Chemosh, is associated with the planet Venus. And incidentally, the name is similar and connected to Astarte and Ishtar, who are also associated with Venus as the morning and evening star. Within the center of that, you can find Luciferian traits, a bringer of light, but also a bringer of darkness as well, in every ancient pantheon that you look into. And it might not be identical to the one that we call Lucifer, but the energy and the traits are there. And that's the connection.
Okay, so are they all of the same being? Are those like Isis, Ishtar, were those real gods?
They were worshipped. They were worshipped.
Beings.
Yeah, they were worshipped in different areas, but they were assimilated over time. You find that in Egypt with Isis, and then Astarte, who became a war goddess in New Kingdom Egypt around the times of Ramses II. And they worshipped that deity in that way. But Lucifer, the Luciferian spirit, is inherent in, and they're all separate, but you can look at energies. Like if you look at a pantheon, you see the Egyptian god Set, who is a warbringer, the god of darkness. But he's also a storm deity. And in, Syria, there was Baal. Baal's a storm god who's later associated with a goetic demon Baal or Beelzebub. But the Egyptians over time saw Baal and Seth as the same deity. They were what they call syncretic religion, to where they were revered in different places under different names, but had the same traits. One thing I'll point out. Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
One thing I'll point out if you talk about the Babylonian or Sumerian pantheon, we start with one of my works, Sebeti, one of the most recent. Sebeti is in reference to the 7 evil gods or 7 rebel gods. And they were considered the Yudug-Hol or Yutuku, the demonic beings who were not answerable to any specific deity, but they kind of did what they want. And sometimes they were messengers for the gods for specific things that they did. But all of these, if you look at the confrontational, the demonic, the dark gods, spirits, demons, they all have, from a Luciferian perspective, creative and balanced aspects too that can be used in a productive way, not just as the worship of evil or the dark. It actually has very little to do with that.
See, the Lucifer, I'm still trying to grasp if Lucifer is at one point was a being, or if Lucifer is just a planet or if, if then I get into astrotheology, and I think that planets might be able to also manifest into like human form,
Yeah.
or God form. So,
Mhm.
that's so what is your take? I mean, do you think Lucifer is an actual one single being, or do you think Lucifer is just a spirit and a whole bunch of archetypes kind of compiled by people's energies focusing?
Well, I think that nature itself, or the nature of the cosmos as we understand it, there is a fallen aspect to it, and that is that Lucifer is a spirit, a anti-cosmic or a casual type of force that is both inherent in darkness and within itself beholds light. It brings light, and what I mean by that is not our kind of idea of light as good and evil, that type of thing, but as insight and the awareness that we have as the gift of the gods, the ability to choose our own form in life. So Lucifer represents a specific type of energy that's inherent within us. And, to narrow this down, Luciferian philosophy, you can be an atheist or you can be a theistic type, depending on how you think normally. And what I mean by that is you apply the philosophy, and if you're a spiritual person, if you're wired to that, if you're drawn to that, then that is going to express itself in the way that you perceive it. If you're an atheist and you apply the philosophy, then it'll be more of an archetype, but that energy is still inherent within you because you're connected to it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so for, the media really pushes, and religions. And one thing I find interesting is how ironic the Vatican has so much power, so much control, and their creation and the Crusades and the witch trials and
Yeah.
so much underneath that umbrella, so much control, and their depiction of Lucifer, and then the other churches that have spawned. And so, I don't know what to make. And I'm agnostic in the term of I'm searching for the truth, but I don't know. And I definitely feel there's higher powers and there's other entities and stuff. And speaking of the symbols that I've been getting in reference to this podcast today, I've been there's 3 days in a row now, a black flowered hornet has flown into my garage. This is day number 3. Okay. And then last week, a tarantula hawk flew into my van on the way to the hill country, which is the biggest wasp in the world. So I looked up what that represents, and it's connected to Saturn. It's connected to the hexagon, the 6-sided hexagon. So I think there's some weird universal synchronicity there talking to me through this. I mean, what is your take on that?
That is a great way of knowing if you're connected, or if in the way that magic works in that sense. Whenever you have messages like that, for instance, Saturn, if you look on the book of the Rauga, the figure shown with the serpent was long considered to be the god of infinite time, Zuran, if you look into like the mysteries of Mithra. But they're finding inscriptions on statues now, for instance, in England from the Roman period, where that Saturn, or that one they called Zurban, is actually inscribed Dio Arimanos, which is the god Ariman. So when you have experiences like that, that tells you you're doing something right. That's an omen, and as how I would take it, that's an omen for a good way to continue. What I'll tell you is that the Luciferian spirit, from the time that I began my initiation, and I began from an early age understanding that I was connected to this spirit. I called it an energy or a spirit, but I felt it very much within me. It was a part of who I was. I related so closely to it that my moral sense was solid, because I always knew, look, this is right and wrong. I had a moral sense, but I still had the spirit, and it guided me through so many hardships growing up and through my early years. But it always increased in what I was doing. And so when I first started my initiation, and Luciferianism came together in this way, there was not a big left-hand path presence in the occult genre. You would hear whispers of it. And of course, you had groups like the Church of Satan, the Temple of Set, all very good organizations in themselves. But mine was, it had a more spiritual aspect, and it was based on what I was doing at the time. I wasn't trying to bring people over to Luciferianism or anything. It was how I thought, and it's how I lived. So for me, that's a very strong example of how that spirit manifests through me. And so when I talk about, depending on how you approach Lucifer or how you believe it, I'm actually saying it depends on what you feel instinctively. I could never tell you to believe this or this without you validating it. It would be unreasonable to do that. But I can tell you that I validated it myself. And that's what these grimoires do. They're kind of gateways.
So the gateways that you're talking about, these grimoires and these sigils that are created, these signs, and then you put things together. So how did the Lucifer sigil actually come into play? How was that formed?
Well, the Lucifer sigil was originally printed in a grimoire called Grimorium Verum. And it's dated in all the editions as 1517. It's probably about 100 years or a little more later that it was actually done. And the Lucifer sigil itself is a very large kind of sigil that when I started working with it, and I've worked with other things like the sigil of Baphomet, but the Lucifer sigil I really was connected to. So in my ritual work, I really narrowed it down to the almost fallen star type of part of that sigil. And I first published that in Book of the Witch Moon in of itself as the sigil of Lucifer. Back in 1999 through 2003 was when the second edition came out. So that was really made because it was simple in that you could focus on it in a ritual or meditative state and find that connection to that spirit and achieve or attain gnosis. So it was really about simplification and also something that you could have that was kind of not really recognizable, specifically satanic or something like that.
Now, is the Luciferian spirit and the satanic, are those two and of the same?
Well, so when you consider the anti-cosmic or the casual, there's different types of energies that manifest in different ways. For instance, if you're invoking Lucifer as the bringer of light, the inspiring spirit of wisdom, of whatever it is within that context, then you wouldn't expect to summon the more chaotic, fiery aspect of Satan. But from the 2nd century on, early Christian writers, 2nd century AD, Tertullian and some different early church fathers, they really united Satan and Lucifer as the same. And they did that because if you look at New Testament, when the letters of Paul and all of the revelations and things like that were written, they were about ancient Greco-Roman religion and the Hellenistic cultures, like the city of Pergamon being the throne of Satan that's the temple of Zeus, and the god of healing, whose symbol was a serpent. So Satan in the New Testament is kind of a combination of all those powers that were contrary to Christian doctrine. So a Luciferian spirit it's of the same energy. It has some of the same kind of power associated with it. But depending on how you call it is how it's going to be applied, how it's going to work.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you several questions because, I mean, there's so much information I want to get in such a limited time that we have here. And I appreciate you spending it with us. Demonic magic. So if somebody says, I'm practicing demonic magic, what does that mean?
Well, it depends on who. One should be careful on who they ask, because some people will tell you something different than what Luciferianism is. And so demonic magic within a Luciferian context is invoking specific type of rebel spirits. Or let me define back up and define what's the difference between gods and demons. So the difference is in all the ancient pantheons, Egyptian, Mesopotamian, all of those, gods were considered, they held a control or an authority of a type of occurrence in nature, or a specific type of element, or something that interacts with us in some ways that we can recognize. A demon is a spirit that's not within that ruling cosmic order, but still plays a role in an interaction, sometimes as a messenger or so forth. So if you're practicing demonic magic and you take the 72 Keys of Solomon and you invoke Belial, then you're not invoking Belial in a Luciferian sense to harm yourself or anyone else, but rather it's a testing energy, because as you call it within you, that energy, or what you call that demon, is going to be filtered through your mind, body, and spirit. And your will is the strength to shape and control that and direct it accordingly to what you want to do, be it a long-term or short-term goal. Belial is associated with mastery or lordship of the earth. What's that mean? That represents your life, your interaction with your daily life, what you want to do in life, be it a job, be it some path you want to go on. That is demonic magic. It's a short-term and sometimes a long-term goal. There's no supplication or worship of something outside yourself. If you have an interaction with what you consider a spiritual force, then it's a mutual respect. That it's something that you give and respect. Many magicians make the mistake of applying the Lesser Key of Solomon or ceremonial magic with the circle that uses the names of Yahweh or Judeo-Christian angels. The problem with that is you're demeaning to the spirit or the demon that you're invoking or seeking to have a communion with. Therefore, you're starting on a path of self-defeat, because you have to bring this energy within you, and there is a specific type of self-esteem and respect, a mutual give and take that's there. Your victory, your success is also honoring and that to that specific power or that demon that you're calling. So with that said, Luciferianism, instead of invoking something with the names of God around a circle, you call it with the name of Azazel, which is one of the Watchers, who is an aspect of Lucifer associated with Venus. And it's a respectful commanding of energy.
So, that's interesting also, because thank you for bringing that up. I have never heard that interpretation before, and that just makes so much sense. And then, because oftentimes I've seen many different circles of protection, and I've obviously seen the ones that have been used in the cult practice, that were in the books that Crowley wrote, and Mathers, etc., that have the names around them. But so let me see if I got what you said correctly. And so instead of putting Yahweh and the angelic names of Yahweh around it, why did you say that would make it self-destructive almost, instead of putting the other, like the left-hand path names around it?
Because if you're identifying with a specific type of energy, or say a Luciferian philosophy, if you're truly thinking in that way, then you're not looking to call something that's much like yourself, the energy that you're working with, and threatening it and trying to compel it with the names of something that you're not working with. It's hypocritical in essence. And even though new magicians who say I'm satanic and they start doing this, they might not understand it. It's more of an unconscious thing, but you start planting the seeds of self-doubt and defeat in doing that. It's not, and Luciferians, when you invoke something, the circle that you use, that you're calling, is not for protection per se. It's for the psychodrama and the focus of your energy by your thoughts and by your will, focusing that energy within a specific space, the extent of your being, your body, mind, and spirit. It's not to hide within a circle and call something and try to control it. You have to bring that within you and command it. And if you feel this energy is overpowering, then you devour it and make it a part of yourself. That was how everything changed for me when I started doing these things. And a lot of people told me, you shouldn't do that. That's really dangerous. And yeah, it is dangerous. But once you start with that philosophy and you apply that and you believe it as it's sitting in front of you, then you will master it.
So you're bringing them in yourself, and it's like your temple, your body, your temple. You're bringing
Yes.
these energies, these archetypes in to help your temple, to help with your works.
Yeah, challenge.
Right?
Yeah, to challenge. To for instance, if there's a specific type of thing that you need, that you want to do, then invoking a specific type of spirit or energy, depending on how you view it, how you believe it is working, then you will get insight into, usually shortly, a short period of time afterwards, insight into how to do that. And that starts working out for you. Does that make sense? It's
Absolutely.
Using energy and directing it as a part of yourself. It's similar to, it's in some ways very close to theurgy, Neoplatonic theurgy, except you're not just controlling the gods, but that energy is working through you as well. And something that people should understand is a vast majority of Luciferian rituals, although some can be very dangerous in working with the darker aspects because they're shadow aspects a part of us, but very few people perform consistent curses. Usually, if you have to do a lot of cursing, that means you probably have a personality problem. You should only have to do one because you're making good decisions in your life and not getting into conflicts with people you don't need to get in conflicts with. So it's better once you start applying that energy that you're doing really productive and creative stuff for yourself and those around you, and very little destructive things.
Yeah, and so let's say that one was to do some work that you would say is dangerous, and it can also be very rewarding if you've got the right precautions and everything prepared for yourself. What would that be? Walk us through something.
Well, a specific type of, let's say, a specific type of initiatory working. For instance, one of the key things in magic, that the entire aim of Luciferian magic, is apotheosis, or awareness of your daemon, coming into contact with your true will. Crowley called it Holy Guardian Angel. It's a sense of the higher aspect of self. The daemon is the guiding, the kind of crown in your personal temple. It's a part of you. It's what you visualize as yourself in perpetual self-excellence, devoid of personality, kind of like an idealized image of yourself. And that is the model for which you strive to become internally and externally. It's not something that you ever attain, as it's always evolving, but you will be led towards the right path. Achieving that type of awareness, apotheosis, is a very difficult path because you have to embrace specific types of things that you were probably brought up to fear. For instance, a demonic invocation, calling Lucifer for the point of attaining forbidden wisdom. Let's say in my book, Fallen Angels, with the Watchers, Azazel creates weapons, teaches people the art of conquering, but also beautification, and how to present yourself in this life, depending on what your goal is. Invoking Azazel would be, in fact, a process of confronting and having no fear for what you could at first feel as a demonic presence. It's overwhelming, but then as you control it, and with your will, desire, belief, you see yourself as that and you as one thing. Confronting that and then seeing yourself through it will bring that awareness, that awakening, if you will, towards your true will, your daemon, and that'll start to visualize. Other types of magic include working with black mirrors. And if you consider what that is a gateway into many consider to be the night side or the spirit realm, the realm of shades and ghosts. Confronting that and being able to open those gates and not listening. One of the key things is you don't take advice or let divination guide your life. You can gain insight from these things, but don't believe them as truth. You have to listen to your instincts. Instincts are very important in Luciferianism. So using that type of thing, that will broaden your spectrum of what to expect in this life and potentially your belief system. So it always goes through not only ritual invocation, you have a goal, but then going through the hard work of meeting that goal. That is going to often push you to your limits of what you thought you could do. And then it's going to push you over that. And you're going to succeed or you're going to fail. It can be dangerous if you allow delusion to control that. And delusion, self-doubt and delusion, once you let those kind of in, it takes a hold and that can destroy you. So you have to have complete faith in yourself when you do these things.
Now, if you were to take it to some of the ancient scriptures and some of the old writings and such, maybe the Sumerian, the Babylonian, what were some of the rituals that they would perform calling upon these God forms to obtain strength or power or wisdom or intelligence? Pick one. Or
Well, I'll give you two examples to kind of give you both spectrums. So in your daily, like if you're working with what you consider gods of order, and what order is just things going right in your life. That would be Bel or Marduk, or Nebo, the god who controlled the divine tablets of that could determine your fate. Invoking Nebo would involve incense. It would involve a libation, a simple hymn or invocation. These are how Luciferianism and the ancients kind of work in that way, in a modern sense. And it would be an invocation to where you're calling this energy, this spirit within you, and you visualize it within yourself as acting through you. And I'm telling you, this little thing, like using your imagination along, but then having a complete faith in it and it being within a rational context, you're going to have results. So invoking those with a thanks offering is honoring yourself and that specific deity. And that could be for, if Marduk, for justice in your life. And justice in a Luciferian or just in daily life means that you don't do anything that's going to hurt any of your friends or loved ones, and you don't want anything done to you. It's kind of being honest with yourself, having your own structure and how you deal with people and sticking to that, and then making good decisions along the way, trusting your instincts. That's how you would work with what I call gods of order in that sense. And all of those, the gods of order, all have Luciferian aspects or that type of spirit itself. Now, if you're working with the demonic, say you're calling Lilith or Lamastu, one of the most dangerous, or Nergal, the god of the underworld, or Eshkigal, or the seven gods, the seven rebel spirits. That would be from a dream projection or controlling, exploring your primal instincts and your unconscious desires. That would be about taking the primal, the energy that drives you, the things that your consciousness can control and direct. You're invoking those specific rebellious demonic archetypes to explore kind of outside of your body in a way, by dream, by utilizing images of what you consider fantasy, to then find if you can actually project yourself outside of your body, the dream experiences you have, and then you compare them with the notes when you're waking in the rational world, in your rational life, and look at it logically. There's a connection there. So they can be used to explore and see. And I say explore and see because everybody's different as to what they're able to do, in their magical work. But the primal aim is to attain a type of mastery over the shadow.
Talking about Lilith and some of these deities, do you think Lilith was actually a person at one point, and then, or no? Okay.
No, and the reason I don't is because there are Sumerian records in hymns and tales of Lamashtu that go from Sumeria to Middle Babylonian, Old Babylonian, Neo-Assyrian, and into the city of Ugarit tablets that list Lamashtu, who was the original, what we call Lilith now. Lamashtu whose name was also Ardat Lily, which is handmaiden of the wind spirit, which is Lilith. She was called the daughter of Anu, or Anam, and she was cast from heaven, or the heavens, the abode of the gods, some of the Anunnaki, because she didn't fit in. She wanted to do predatory things. She didn't really have a use for humans and saw them as food initially. This is the myth. So she was cast from heaven, and then she was taught by Ea, or Enki, the god of magic and water and healing. So Lamashtu eventually, and then you see there was Lilitu, Lily and Ardat Lily, three different types of wind spirits that are associated with Lamashtu, and then Lilith, who was called a goddess of Kililasana, associated with the tree of Gilgamesh and all that stuff. She has a long history, but eventually was made more manifest in Hebrew lore. So Lilith was definitely a deity, a nocturnal deity, and a predatory one, depending on how you looked at her.
I am so glad you brought up the Anunnaki and Enki and On and Lilith and the family tree there. Yeah. Enki, I've wondered before, is Enki Lucifer? And is Enki, and if you read through these Sumerian tablets, I've read dozens of Sumerian tablets from Oxford Universities. I've read some of Sitchin's work and others. I've read multiple translations from multiple people, so I have a wide perspective. And Enki is the one that in these tablets is helping the humans. Like he warned Noah, Ziusudra, about the flood when they were going to wipe everybody out. The gods were going to wipe out the humans. And that makes me think we're kind of like the AI for the gods.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever thought that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. If you look at Enki, look at his origins. He was one of the main rebels against the primal Absu, who slayed Absu, Tiamat's, the primal dragon, Tiamat's mate, and usurped and eventually championed, had Marduk champion for him. He's the instructor of magic. He taught Lamashtu, the vampiric goddess, but he also helped humans. He set forth the Akalu, or the earlier myths of the Watchers, who were the ones who came from the ocean to teach humans So Enki or Ea is very much a Luciferian a deity, probably the origin to some respect to the later Lucifer myth.
Now I'm starting to put things in more of a perspective. It sounds to me like it's more of the title almost based upon a spiritual doctrine and a following. And there, Enki might have been the originator, or at least that we know of, but it's not a specific person. Kind of like when you hear the term Antichrist, Antichrist, Antichrist. There's many Antichrists out there. It's not just one person, it's a title. And for example, the gods, the Indian religion traditions, they say 300 million gods. And Enki in the Sumerian tablets created the gods to do the work for them and the higher gods. So it's like a title. It's like, oh, that's the assistant manager. Oh, that's the district manager.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And that's kind of, that's what I'm saying to some extent. When it comes to, like, you take Revelations, you've got Satan, you've got the dragon, who's also Satan, the seven-headed dragon, you've got the beast from the sea, the Antichrist, all this in Revelations. But then you have Apollyon from the abyss. Now, that comes from Apollo. Apollo is also associated with the solar deity Orions or Helios. And he was kind of called the angel of the abyss too. He could plague someone with an arrow. It was Apollo. They added later he was called Apollyon, but he was also called Apollyon in some Hellenistic places in Asia Minor. Apollo is a healing god, a god of music, of art, of creativity, but he can also slay people cruelly and also send plague. So you see, there's these type of Luciferian spirits, or the pantheons, all have creative and destructive capabilities, much like humans. They're not just absolutely good or absolutely evil. Because if they were, they would undo themselves, if that makes sense. You have to have a sense of balance.
That's a great point. Balance, 50-50. Do you think that that's exactly how the universe is, 50-50, right down the middle?
I do, to an extent, but at different times, you'll have one having a little bit of sway more than the other. But there always seems to be for every destructive thing that happens, there's always something kind of creative or productive that rises from it. It's part of the universe in that sense. You have to embrace the destruction to then see the creation. So yeah, I think there's a good balance that sometimes is off-sided a little, but always sways back to make it even.
Okay. And if we could get into the Nephilim. First, I'd like to get your take on the Nephilim, and then let's get into the Nephilim magic. That sounds awesome.
Well, the Nephilim or Nephilim, if you look at the book of Enoch, one of the it was written between 165 and the time of Antiochus IV, one of my favorite Seleucid kings. He was a Syrian Macedonian. That was written at that time of when the book of Maccabees was done. And it tells a tale of a lot of the Greco or Hellenistic culture that brought different ways to the people of Jerusalem and the people of that specific tribe. And the book of Enoch shows a beautiful tale of how these 200 watchers descended, each having a different type of skill or knowledge that they were excelling at. That upon the Mount Hermon, they made an oath and that they were going to bring knowledge to humans. And so they did, according to the myth. They took wives and they mated with those wives, and it was a union of spirit with earthly flesh. to create these giants. Now, these giants, many consider, if you look at how it was presented, they were like the old Mycenaean, or around the time of Troy, the Greek heroes. And what were these heroes? Were they beyond human capacity now? Well, you can't really say no, or that they were or were not, but what they were people who strove to conquer and command their own lives and set up their own, so that their names would be remembered. These giants were very much Luciferian in that aspect. So the Watchers taught different things. You have Azazel, who I talked about earlier, taught weapons and also how to present yourself, beautification. You have Shemyaza, who is the god Eshman, a healing god, who taught root magic and witchcraft and how to cast spells. And all of these different Watchers imparted this wisdom to man. So if you look at Fallen Angels, this grimoire, in working with the Watchers, it started from so many years ago. It's part of a tradition to use these as guides in your path in life. And in doing that, I took the names. There was the Ethiopian Book of Enoch, and there are several different versions of it. So I took those translations and I compared them, and then the meanings of those names, and utilize these sigils that use the original Aramaic spellings, but also the Greek translations, because they had their origins in the Greek language, and started and understood that they have a different perspective, and then using it based on the elements and the planetary associations. So these sigils, in doing that, you're invoking that power. I tried to make that, and all of my works, I want to honor these powers, these Luciferian powers. So authenticity is very important to me in a modern context.
That's fascinating. And then even that makes me think about, so when I go back 10 years ago, it was like 10 or 12 years ago when I got that book of yours, and I was just in the beginning of starting to research the occult, the mystical arts, and I was just trying to figure out what was going on, because I felt like I'd been lied to with religious doctrine so much. And anyway, so I remember looking at some of these rituals that you were showing in there, and you were showing them, I guess, more of like a history standpoint. You were showing some ancient Sumerian stories or rituals, spells. And I was like, whoa, man, that's far out. But that was based on thousands of years ago. That was like 5,000-6,000 years ago those spells were done.
Yeah, a lot of one of the things I really insisted on doing in my magical workings was embrace, what were considered the darkest and most demonic spirits, and I felt instinctively that these can be guided and directed in a progressive way. So demons like the Udog Hul, the ones that all these exorcisms were done for in Samaria, I wasn't doing exorcisms. I was invoking or encircling and through sorcery, bringing them within me and around me. And in doing that, I'm telling you, everything started to change. And after a few years, and probably around the time that you got that book, I had this, I can't really explain how this occurred, but I always have these things that happen as omens. And I started to find all these avenues of research that I couldn't do previously, because most of the public, when you want to research something like Satan, Lucifer, anything like that, you get really, like, you hit a brick wall at Barnes and Noble. You're not going to find much. You're going to find whitewashed things or just very commercial biblical explanations, which won't tell you a lot. You have to go to the translations and then find the academic studies on the cultures they're from, and through the religions, you'll find these. And that's what opened up to me. And it elevated my path and this work to a whole new level. So when you take those books, you get philosophy. I've got 3 components to each grimoire in the past 10 years. and that is show how the ancient works with the modern, give descriptions and the etymology of the pantheon, the gods, demons, spirits, what they mean, what they did, and how you can utilize them now, and then modern interpretations of the ancient rituals to invoke them. That means names of power, descriptions of the spirit. All of these are meant to be as guides for the person who takes this gateway or grimoire and then can adapt it to their own life.
Now, what you brought up when you were talking about the Nephilim and saying how they came down and they manifested into physical form, it was like the spirit connected with the physical. That reminds me of the Blavatsky work, Secret Doctrine, when she wrote about it in the 1890s, and she said that my book here is going to be a lot of scientists and anthropologists, etc., going to look at this and say, "Oh man, you're crazy." That's basically what she said. But science is confirming it now. Like a lot of the stuff that she has said and what you just said, that makes, and then you brought up the 200 different watchers that come down, the Nephilim. Each one of them has a specific component that they give to humanity. And I remember reading about, I've read the different Enoch books, I think there's 3 different versions. I've read all 3, at least 3 that I know of. And it talks about how they made the pact, right? How they made a pact. Yes. Well, that was the pact. They were like they were merging with mankind. And now they can live in perpetuity through this medium. Like some of us, especially certain bloodlines, more so than others, would be like the drones for the Nephilim. They'd be like working through their DNA.
Yeah. Well, not only in that type of scenario, but look, as when you call something, they used the oath that they used was called a K. That's how it translates. And they were using names of power through their pacts, through this is what we're going to do, words of power, which resonate with humans in our unconscious. And when you take those and you take these names of power and you call on that, you're awakening or tapping into that energy within yourself. And that's what people can kind of like symbolically call witch blood, or the kind of watchers being the patron spirit of the path. When you look at those and you invoke that type of power, you're becoming like the offspring of heaven and earth, just like the tales in Enoch, because that spirit is within you, and then you have you're of the rational physical world. So there's that unification in that sense. When you consider that type of power is expressing itself through you, you're in control of it. It's very much a, quote, satanic or Luciferian thing, but not in the way that most people can think. It's not in a destructive sense. It's that you are the one commanding your existence, your life, and what happens in it to a major extent.
If we could also jump, let's jump now to the Drauga again, because that is, talk about another synchronicity. I've done several podcasts where I've described the serpents that are wrapped around even god forms, and you find them in multiple pantheons, and it makes me think of the DNA. It makes me think of, maybe it's Enki and how he's kind of gotten his, how do I put it? Talons into everything, or whatever it is at that point that shows these forms. It's symbolic, but it's also, I think it's very it's significant.
Yeah, the god of the Cataseus, or the original serpent god, Ningishzida, and his father Ninanzu. His symbol was the two Muhusu dragons, or serpents, because dragons and serpents the words are nearly identical in Babylonian, Sumerian, and ancient Persian. The twin serpents represented the underworld, or the chthonic realms, and that's not necessarily of the dead. That's of the underworld, in the sense of fertility, of renewal, of healing, and a connection with the divine or demonic. And those two serpents also represent knowledge, wisdom. The shedding of skin is the, if you call it, to the DNA of our evolution, our renewability, our ability to expand and evolve from old states of being if our will so designs it. So in that aspect, the serpents, and going into Drauga, here's an interesting point. Drauga means, in translation, the lie. Ahriman's associated with the lie. Now, the word Drauga is associated with Druj, which is connected to Dahai or Dahak, which is serpent. So when you say the lie, you're not talking about deceiving people. That's what many misinterpret it as. It's actually not deception. It's the lie is ever changing. In chaos, that you have that renewing of the serpent, the shedding of the skin, and the transformation and the compelling of your will. That's kind of a secret aspect that many don't see in the darker aspects of magic. It's not about deceiving or getting one over on someone or leading them blindly. The world outside of that does that automatically. People do very cruel things to each other. But this is about renewing yourself, transforming and gaining your inner power to then compel it in this life.
Okay. And so then when the serpents, and you brought up Ningersiga, I think I said that properly. I want to go over to the serpents described in the Book of the Dead. There's one or two spells in particular that I'm thinking of where the snakes, there's a snake, there's a cat, and the cat has a knife, and the cat's acting as it's going to cut the snake. And I thought, and when I first saw that, I was like, wait, does that mean they're going to cut the perpetual cycle of life, or is that cutting the connections to a specific
one of the
karmic cycle?
Well, on two levels, is that in this world of order that we see is surrounded with darkness and chaos. Chaos is our origin. Tiamat was from chaos. Order and a new, and this world of cause and effect came from that. A pep, or the serpent that's being slayed that fights against the gods, is that force of primal chaos. What we return to are the destruction, but also our potential to master it. So when you see Set slaying a pep, or the cat fighting a pep, that's about mastering the chaos and bringing order to it and shaping it by your will. That is a secret point of initiation. If you look at any initiatory brotherhoods, any of the old ones, it's about self-mastery. In self-mastery, then there is mastery of your immediate environment in your world, by decision, by thought, by how you think, by how you speak. All of that is shaping it. Those who allow chaos to consume them are not using strength and the will to shape it, so it becomes a destructive force.
Now, let's jump to another topic if we can. And you've written several books on this, vampire magic. Yes. What is it? How do you do it? Is it, oh, come here? What, I mean, that was a joke, Transylvania style, but it's more of a mental thing, right? I mean, you're kind of mentally.
Well, yeah, let me first present it in the philosophical, as the foundation for what it is in a rational, logical sense. So if you look at all of the symbolism of the medieval symbol of the vampire, and you go back to Lilith, and you go back to Nergal, the god Nergal of the underworld in Babylonia, all of these had vampiric aspects. And what does that mean? Is they master and devour the predators. They devour life. The drinking of blood is the bringing in of life, like the Christians do with the blood of Jesus and all that. In our primal state of being, the reptilian part of the brain, the earliest part that we evolved from, is a predatory being. Everything in this earth that lives consumes something, even if you're vegan or try to be vegan, consumes something else in some way, whether it's a living plant, whether it's an animal. The predatory cycle is that part of creation and destruction. Now, Luciferians, if you utilize the core aspect of vampirism, starts with thinking that if you look in physics, energy, when we think or how we think, we create energy. We can change energy by our thoughts, our simple thoughts, and how we think, how fast we think, the intensity of which we think. We create that energy. That's what people can see as auras. And if you ever go into a room and there's a certain type of energy, if people are in a bad mood, or if they're angry, or if they're sad, or if they're excited, you can feel that. It's not just by looking at people's faces, you can feel that energy. And knowing that, if you start to think you want to consume energy and then bring it in and then control it and kind of transform it and shape it to enhance and feed that spiritual aspect, then on that basic level, you are practicing vampirism. It's not about putting on, even though I have a black shirt on, it's not about putting on just all black and going to the local goth club, or putting in vampire fangs. And that it's not that per se. That can be an imagery that people like and apply. But the core aspect of vampirism is about consuming that type or energy around you and enhancing your life with it. Vampirism also has a more dangerous and detailed process of magical initiation in what some vampires call the night side, which is dream projection, dream control, which is related to astral projection, and feeding energy from others on the astral plane. Some vampires can do it in malicious ways. Some don't. As someone who's practiced since 1993 was when I first joined the Temple of the Vampire, and then an order of vampires, astral vampires, that I was friends. We started the Black Order of the Dragon, and have continued all these years, even though you don't hear a lot about it. That is an order of self-mastery and using that type of energy. But in the process of explaining Luciferianism, normally I don't even get into the vampiric aspect, because it's very esoterically based as opposed to the philosophy.
Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about different types of magic and different rituals and different mediums to use, etc. And there's a lot of writings about blood and ritual. And even if you look at the Eucharist, it's that you're not literally drinking the blood of Jesus, but they're representing the blood of Jesus. And if you go to an LDS church, they don't even give you wine. You just get water, and you get some white bread. You get a little bit of white bread, and you do have to sit through 3 hours. But hey, I'll tell you, it's exciting. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
And no, I have a lot of friends and family that are LDS, and they're wonderful people. They really are. So I'm just playing around, but that's true. They don't give you wine. They give you a little bit of water, a little cup. So do you use blood in rituals?
Early on, when I started going into the dark, the left-hand path, and following my instincts, I never kill, you don't kill animals, first of all. The practice of sacrifice in that sense was done by the early Christians, the Hebrew gods, offerings to Yahweh, but also all the other gods, because this was a thank offering and a sacred offering to the gods. Blood offerings, usually burnt offerings, were done through the smoke going to the heavens. Blood offerings were made to some ancestral dead in Greece, in Hellenistic times, and through even Samaria with the Utuku or the Atemu ghosts. But then you have blood offerings to underworld deities as it nourished and renewed. Now, when I first started applying these rituals in this very dark and sinister way, I understood that using my own blood could enhance the connection with the particular energy you were calling. But over the years, I've discovered that just using libations of, depending on what you're doing in the working, water, wine, even beer, because it's sacred to Set and some of the other gods, that you don't have to use your blood, and that has nothing to do with vampiric magic in that sense. You don't have to use your blood, and you can use incense as well. Now, on some of my consecrations of, say, certain types of statues, or what I have as a spirit pot, which has associations with my daemon, it's kind of a aromatic sorcery type thing. I use blood, my own blood, to consecrate certain things because it makes that connection more intense for me. So there's not actually any consistent sharing of blood in Luciferian rites. You don't drink someone's blood. You don't hurt anything. There's different type of witchcraft applications where the one type of offering that has been made for those who take it is the toad rite, but that toad is associated with the devil in that aspect as a guiding spirit. So you're not drinking blood in these vampiric rites, and you're not killing anything.
You know, that's I appreciate you clarifying that, and I think about the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and I don't think they were actually written by Thoth, but I think that they're beautiful, timeless writings. I think that they're incredible information, and they talk about the Dark Brotherhood and how before Atlantis, the Dark Brotherhood made a pact through blood, and they were going to work through not only the blood, but through the leaders of the world in high positions of power. And then I think of certain factions that will, you know, offer animals as sacrifice, or and then you go back to even look what the Mayans were doing and the Aztecs and stuff. Yeah. At least from what I have read, I mean, they were doing some real gnarly, nasty things, and they, blood sacrifice, ripping out people's hearts and stuff like that. So the energy around it must have been, I mean, I'm sure you could feel the energy. I'm sure it was a very powerful energy, very dark, very gnarly, very dense. So, I mean, would you connect all those dots? Are there demons out there or nasty entities that literally just want pain and suffering, and you're not going to be able to control that? And if you try, they're going to get you?
It's not about, I think it's not about wanting pain and suffering. It's about the energy enhancement that it brings in the offering of blood. I would consider that there probably are spiritual powers that feed specifically on that. But they're not out to, unless there's a fear, when you fear something, when you have a fear, that releases energy. And a lot of paranormal investigators, ones that I know and that I've read about, when you have fear, that energy, or if you consider it a haunting presence or demonic presence, it will grow stronger in what it can do. And the hauntings will increase based on if it's feeding off that fear. So that's a good feeding energy. But as far as in terms of blood offerings and things like that, that really has nothing to do with compelling your will in any magical sense. But if you look at the Inquisition and you look at the things that people have done in the name of God or Yahweh, and you look at Old Testament writings, that's kind of a vile spirit in itself, in the things that it wants done.
Great. Thank you for that. And this is a question from the audience. This is from Lee. What do you think about Hegelian dialect and neurolinguistic programming?
I think that when you consider how we interact with the world and how there's agendas, and there's agendas because it's just the way how the world works, how the media kind of sends down what do you call scenarios, or a type of way that they want to project how people look at things. It's done in a certain way. Having these unconscious things spread through our media, through TV, through what we read, through things we hear, the things we buy, that controls, and that's kind of passed on by the people who have the power in this world. And that's just not like presidents or anything like that, but the people that support that. So I think that those type of avenues of control are valid. As a Luciferian, I'm not in that arena of spreading that type of kind of thing onto people. That's more of on another level, but I'm not blind to it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And then let's jump over to, this is another book that you wrote. And I mean, the thing that I like about your work is, once again, no fluff. I mean, this is the real deal. I'm reading through the comment section. It's funny because there's always going to be somebody out there that's going to be like, you don't know, you're talking about somebody who goes, oh, this guy doesn't really know about demons. I'm like, okay, man. Well, I mean, some of this is hilarious. I mean, really? Are you listening to the conversation, or are you a troll? Like, are you like literally some type of AI bot that was created? I don't know. Some people are just, and I'm sweating profusely in my garage. This is awesome. I love it. I love how hot it is in here. So let's talk about the magic of the adversary and the Bible of the adversary. Is that anything like the Anton LaVey book of or Bible of Satanic Bible?
Well, the Satanic Bible is a great guide, and the time that it was published, there was nothing else like it. And LaVey was very focused on rational self-interest, rejecting what people commonly call truth as lies, and getting to understand who you were and what you wanted to achieve. And this was done in the basic language of what people call LaVeyan Satanism. It's based in the carnal, and it's not necessarily looking towards self-evolution or initiation in any formal sense. It's here and now, enjoy your life, make rational decisions, and don't be a criminal. That was the basis of it. But embrace what people call the demonic, because it's also part of this world in the balance. So that book presented a lot of, like, when I read it years ago, when I came and I always felt I was connected to the adversarial spirit. When I finally read the Satanic Bible, this was just it wasn't something that said, oh, wow, I have to change my ways. No, I was already thinking this way. And it was like somebody patting you on your shoulder saying you're on the right path. So that work was important. The Bible of the adversary, when this work was put together, was about taking every adversarial spirit, demonic presence, and bringing it together and finding how this can work through you in a progressive way. So that means looking to its origins. What are the etymological, the archaeological and mythological origins? and what role do they play in a balanced way in the ancient world. And it's about using them maybe in the mask of the demonic and what people call the evil aspect, but going behind that image of that and finding the energy that works for you and through you. So the Bible, the adversary, begins with the philosophy of Luciferianism. What are the basic things devoid of magic or in a rational sense that you apply? And then understanding the origins and the meanings of these so-called demonic spirits and deities, and then how to utilize and understand those elements and symbols and how to control them and shape them and that experience through you. And then it goes through Gnosticism, Samael, Yaltabroth, Sacklis, the Gnostic Luciferian perspective, which is different from others. And then the Yatukdano or the Drauga, the Aramanian ancient Persian sorcery, and the traditional demonic one of the grimoire tradition. So it's a very balanced grimoire in that aspect, but it compels you to embrace what's internally within you, the balance between Samael and Lilith, which creates the image of Baphomet, which is, if you reveal it, who's Baphomet? It's not something you worship. It's a representation of the individual, the magician, the initiate.
See, I've often wondered if Baphomet is actually the representation of the dualistic reality that we're in. So saying it's the magician, I guess that's kind of one and of the same. That would make a lot of sense. That's the mind, that's the archetype, the as above, so below, the yin, the yang, the male aspect, the feminine aspect. Wow, that's fascinating. And then, so if you were to get into, I wanted to go over to your YouTube channel here. I'm on your YouTube channel right now, folks. Check out Michael Ford's YouTube channel. Just type in Michael W. Ford, hit the subscribe button. And you talk about, the tarot and divination. And what I wonder, because some people are so good at the tarot, like every time they pull a card, it's just like, wow, that's spot on. Is there something kind of working through them to do that manifestation, or is it just just a really neat set of archetypes that you can connect with your mind and come up with something on your own?
Well, the ancient Canaanites, and going into the Old Testament, called divination a communion with demons or a divination spirit. And divination, really, those in using the tarot, isn't necessarily an external spirit, although some will probably look at that, and probably opponents of divination will say it's a malicious spirit guiding someone, but actually is related to your daemon, your personal daemon, your true will, your patron spirit that's within you. And in using and opening that up, you're gaining insight into potential answers that you feel are the right ones. And sometimes in using tarot, you can also use them to project through into specific type of energies that are related to the cards, to the images on the cards and what those represent. You can use them in dream, in meditation, in all types of ceremonies. So they're not just used to read, but anyone who's good with tarot, and you don't have to know everything about them. I'm pretty good with tarot, but there are tarot reader friends that I have that are just way beyond what I do with it. But every time I use it, I have this instinctual connectivity to it. And I understand the attributes and I understand how it works for me. And it's always been a great guide for both divination and for just projecting through and using in ceremony.
Thank you. And then this is another thing that I'm fascinated with is the tree of life, but there's a different term for it, and I don't know how to pronounce it properly when it's like the opposite term of the Kabbalah, the Qliphoth.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, the Qliphoth was my the Qliphoth is very difficult to navigate through. And let me explain why. When I began my magical path, you have the Kabbalah, which is based on a Hebrew doctrine and a medieval Jewish approach to magic, which is uniquely very colorful to their own tradition. I have a lot of respect for the lore, the demonic lore that came from Kabbalah. But if you approach the Qliphoth in a modern sense, I had this problem of, you know, you almost defeated from the beginning because you just don't work through the demonic in that sense. But I utilized Kenneth Grant's, some of his Typhonian, and Crowley, some of his Qliphothic structures, and I went beyond that. And what I found was each sphere of death or hidden wisdom has specific attributes and energies associated with it. When you have that, you have to look towards, are these all destructive? Well, as you invoke these energies in each different on the tree, each one has a potential to be really creative for you and productive, or destructive. There's no deity on the other side saying, helping you out. You have to make those decisions. So it can be, if you destroy yourself with it, then that's a choice that you chose. If you do creative things with it, then you continue on your path. The Qliphoth has many primal aspects, but its origins are many different ancient deities. And like Baal, who became Beelzebub or Baal in the Goetia. Ashtaroth, who's associated with the Lucifer as Venus, the morning and evening star, just with a changed gender. You have at Kether, you have Thamiel, which is associated with the fire adversary Satan, and Moloch. Moloch is actually an underworld chthonic deity, and a lot of people thought, well, didn't they burn children to Moloch? That's what the Bible says. Well, there's no evidence that anyone ever burnt children or their firstborn children to Moloch. Moloch was an underworld deity, and when they say pass through the fire, the language that was used, a lot of scholars think it was a baptizing type of thing where you just pass through the fire quickly, like when you move your hand through flame and you don't burn yourself. It was kind of a baptism and honoring between the ancient ancestors, the deceased ones, the Rephaim, and that. So the Qliphoth has very predatory and demonic images, but once you utilize it and control it and understand it and how it works, then it can be used in a balanced, productive way.
Now that's interesting. And the way that you put that, passing through the fire, not being thrown in the fire, right? I mean, it's kind of, You're bringing up so many different variables that it's going to make a lot of people look at things from a different perspective. And I know it's going to a lot of people are going to be hitting this wall. They're going to be like, well, it makes sense, but no, I can't do it. I can't. Because it's just so, most people have been indoctrinated with this mindset of, if you even say the term Lucifer, then you're automatically talking about this red devil with a pitchfork that, is just this evil goblin and doing these nasty, terrible things. But in reality, the term Lucifer even means light bearer.
Yeah.
So if you want to take light bearer as evil, that's your.
Well, think about it this way. When you think about Enki, Ea, and DNA, or the command of blood, one of the tests in that perspective is Lucifer, the symbol of the adversary, the image of the adversary, is a confronter, a challenger, a motivator. And if you are in connection with that energy, that spirit, then it, even though it hurts and it's a struggle, it makes you better. That is the DNA. If you talk about the connection of DNA and Enki, That's the test that everyone is faced with. The adversary shocks. That first mention of Lucifer may shock, but after you get past the shock, do you then just avoid it and run the opposite way? Or do you seek to understand it within yourself and master that within yourself, and then opening doorways to a new, whole different path in life? That's the test. And that's if DNA, if you want to think of it in DNA, or if the blood is passing through, that's one way. That's the test of Magick.
Okay. And now your most recent work is Wisdom of
Eosphoros.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Well, Wisdom of Eosphoros is a very simple guide to the philosophy of Luciferianism, devoid of the trappings or the symbolism of magic. It's really in kind of the historical origins and how they worked into modern Luciferianism and the philosophy. A more recent title that has undergone a 10-year anniversary was the new Bible, The Adversary. That has much of what was in Wisdom of Eosphoros published in this, in a new concise guide. And this work really goes into just what are the 11 points of power, how do you apply each one, and then how does that create that change in that kind of self-transformation and empowerment.
And if you would, before we close out tonight, give the audience some words of wisdom that they're not going to find anywhere else.
Well, what I'll tell you is this. Let me give you a couple. I'll read two things from the Bible, The Adversary, and the 11 Points of Power. And I want you to think about what I was talking about with when you think of DNA or a passing on of insight. You can read something or someone can say something to you, but if you are not in tune to seize that and gain that knowledge, then it means nothing. You have to look beyond the symbol, deeper than the symbol. This is what was passed to us through evolution or tales from like the Watchers. So the symbol of the adversary, this is 2 of the 11 points of power. The symbol of the adversary is that of the self-liberator and spiritual rebel who inspires self-evolution. So we have to understand who the primal darkness within us, our instincts, our desires, our lusts, our drives, our fears. And then we have to rise up, and how do we control and shape that so it doesn't become something that destroys us in this life? That's key. So you have to see that the adversary is a motivator, a challenger, a destroyer, but also one who makes way for something new. And living as if you are the mind, body, and spirit, the very temple of the Luciferian spirit, makes you upon the path of apotheosis. And that is a continual path. The adversary, this is number 4, the adversary symbolizes the spark of consciousness which questions everything, manifesting the individualistic path with accountability only to the self. So basically, everything that we are taught in this life, in the rational physical world, we're told things by a media, by people, by government officials who have an agenda. And this is the way the world has always worked. It's not bad. It's only bad if you if you work against it in a way that'll just destroy you. So operate within the system of laws, have a strong personal moral sense, but then see what people are told and then seek the knowledge, the real knowledge behind that. How do you do that? You have to look at the patterns. If you look at the patterns and you dig deep enough, you'll find that knowledge. What do you do with it? Well, you make it work for you. And if you make it work for you, that is enhancing the Luciferian spirit. That is the manifestation of the adversary. Remember, in the New Testament, they say it right. Satan is the prince of this world, prince of the powers of the air. What is the master of this world? For a Luciferian, that's someone who makes rational, conscious decisions in their life for the betterment of their friends, family, and their life. Not just a one-sided selfish thing, but in a complete picture of what's a good balance. So mastering your own life is essentially being the master of the world in a kind of personal sense. So those are two things that I would say have a lot of layers that if you look into, you'll find some useful knowledge.
Right on. Thank you so much, Mr. Ford. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael W. Ford, go to his YouTube channel, go to his website. Now, your website, I'm on it right now. It is luciferianapotheca.com. And there's music, clothing, books, home decor, information, all sorts of stuff. Thank you for coming on the show. And hopefully I can get you on the show again sometime and not 3 years from now, maybe sometime in the next near future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right on. Ladies and gentlemen, also check out the Leak Project shop. Go to leakproject.com. Also subscribe, youtube.com/clandestine time lord. Question everything. That's my motto. And be excellent to each other and be the change you want to see.